With the ongoing pandemic, the discussion of vote by mail has come to the fore, with proponents citing public safety and accessibility as reasons for doing so, and opponents citing the potential for voter fraud as a reason against it. I spoke with Cheryl Clyburn-Crawford, the Executive Director of MassVOTE, to find out more.
In many of our polling locations, it's already overcrowded. We need to do some re-precincting of some of our polls. So we already have long lines, particularly during presidential election years. If we do not do something right now, we probably will have the same types of issues. And we really don't want to run into that because we don't want to make people have to choose between staying healthy and voting.
And we've seen here in Massachusetts, early voting has happened recently in the most previous election. We've seen it 3 times in recent election cycles. We haven't seen movement from the legislature yet to make that happen, either for what's happening for September voting or November voting. How soon do you think legislators need to act?
I think there are pieces of legislation in the works right now at the State House where they're discussing it, because that is also critical. We would love to have mail-in ballots. We think that's going to be the most effective way to run the election this year. But we do need to make it possible for those that want to vote in person. And we think early voting, having extended hours, expanded hours would make that possible.
So it's a combination of things that you would like to see. You're not advocating for specifically mail-in voting exclusively.
Correct. We would like to see a combination and maybe add some other pieces, maybe curbside voting. I don't know. We're talking about a bunch of different options just to ensure that we, really make it as inclusive as possible.
You mentioned that there are a few legislative proposals on Beacon Hill right now. I want to look at a couple of the specifics. So Senator Cynthia Cream's bill would allow anyone who's worried about being exposed to COVID-19 to get an absentee ballot. And right now there are very specific reasons to request an absentee ballot. Do you think that needs to be opened up?
Absolutely. But I know that they gave us a temporary piece of legislation that expires the end of June that adds COVID-19 as one of the reasons. So they have expanded it. We just need them to extend this piece of legislation further.
The 2020 Vote by Mail Act is also among those measures that are on Beacon Hill right now. And among the items included in that proposed legislation would provide that in November that everyone would get a ballot by mail. Now, there's been concerns raised primarily among Republicans that a move like this would mean that a ballot could fall into the wrong hands if that's done. Do you think that that's a possibility and a concern that you share?
Anything's a possibility, right? But it's not a concern that we share. Absolutely not. We think everybody should be. We want to shift the burden from the voter, to our legislators. Mail everybody a ballot, so that if they want to vote, they are able to vote. They shouldn't have to, the whole process for absentee ballots, requesting them, sending it back, getting the ballot, that back and forth takes up too much time. We need to make sure that every person that wants a ballot has the ballot in their hand.
In terms of the mechanism, and this gets into the nitty-gritty a little bit, how do you differentiate between those people who would then have their voting taking place in their own home if the ballot was sent to them, versus, as you say, people should have the opportunity to go to the poll in person should they want that?
Well, this is 2020. We have technology that can track folks. I'm sure that absentee ballots will come with some type of coding that's specific to individuals. The same way when you go in and vote and you have to check off your name that it's you. I mean, there are a lot of pieces that we still have to figure out what the process will be and how it will work. But we have enough time to do that. And that's why we started early.
Secretary of State Bill Galvin has spoken out in support, saying that, the vote by mail option is one that he thinks should be considered. He told WGBH News that when looking at this issue, legislators should increase the 10-day window that people who vote early by mail usually receive, and that should be happening right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think we should expand it. We should lengthen that period of time. I'm not sure if it should be happening right now, but soon. And we do need to expand it, make it a longer period of time.
In terms of if you think that this is something that the state legislature will weigh in on, are you hopeful that they will step up and take action?
Absolutely. It is critical. And I think we're getting a groundswell. People are really paying attention to what's coming down the pipeline on the other side of COVID or during COVID, with all the uncertainty around where we will be in September with this and where we will be in November. I think now is the time for us to get active. I think our legislators are on board and they're seriously considering it. They too want democracy to move forward.
But are you concerned because the Supreme Judicial Court needed to get involved regarding the number of signatures that are required to get a person's name on the ballot? The legislature didn't take action on that.
I think something just passed recently where they are here in Massachusetts, where they're reducing the number of signatures required. They've extended the period of time, and they're also taking electronic signatures.
Yeah, the SJC needed to get involved in that decision because the state legislature opted not to get involved, even though people had been saying, this is something that legislators, you could and should take up.
And you know how it is. Sometimes people need a little push.
Yeah. Indeed, right? And there's just so much going on right now.
Absolutely.
Congressman Richard Neal has been advocating, as others have, for additional money to be coming from the federal level to the states to take a look at these issues that you and I have spoken about, as well as others involved in because of COVID-19 in the lead up to the November election. Some money has come down in the stimulus packages that have already been passed in the 6 or 7 weeks we've been dealing with this new normal. Have you thought about how much money should come from the federal government to a state like Massachusetts? And if so, what would that dollar amount be?
I honestly have not put the number. It's a big number. And I know that we have it. I know that some of our funds could possibly come from the Harvard bucket that we already have on hand, and then other federal money. $4 million. I'm not sure if I'm out the ballpark. I've heard so many numbers over so many different things over the past week or so, but I know that we can do this if we choose to do this. We can do this if we want to do this, and the money is there.
What do you think about the current way that this is being handled on a state by state basis? There's almost sort of like a popcorn effect that might take place. One state handles it the November election this way, another state handles it another way. Is this an effective way, an efficient way to be getting this done?
Unfortunately, I don't believe that it is. It could be more effective if it was coming down from the top, saying this is how we're going to run the November election, that people were assured that they really cared that we had a November election, that they really cared that every eligible voter was able to vote. It would be so much smoother if they said, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do mail-in ballots this year. We're in the middle of a pandemic. This is our new normal. Let's do something different that is inclusive, that will keep our democracy flowing.
But as soon as I'm sure some Republicans hear that idea of just across the board mail-in voting, many of them would be opposed to that. Why do you think that this has become a partisan issue and such a contentious one?
One, I stay away from the partisan side of it. Our issue is making sure that democracy continues. All that political, it's about who's going to win, right? Like who's going to be in the White House, who's going to be our leader of the free world. It's all of that entwined in the fear that if we are more open with our elections and more inclusive with our elections, you just might not get in. Well, do your job, do it and be inclusive. You should not have to worry about that piece of this. This is our right, so they say. This is our right to have the option and the opportunity to vote in every election. Do your job and make sure that happens.
I want to pivot slightly for a minute. Among your other pursuits, you're a member of the Attorney General's Advisory Council on Racial Justice and Equity. Race and equity and the health disparities that we've seen related to COVID-19. We've seen that minority communities have been unduly impacted by this virus. in terms of the way that you have seen both the state and the federal government respond to these disparities, what is your overall thought on that?
So I think, these disparities are not new. And what COVID-19 is doing is exposing it in its fullest. The institutional racism that exists in this country, that exists in our own state, is there, and it's very prevalent, and it exists. And if yes, we do have these illnesses, these underlying illnesses in a much higher rate or proportion than other races, and it's due to all the things that have always occurred. The inequities around education, the inequities around healthcare, the inequities around you know income disparities. It's just a whole combination of stress factors that we already are dealing with. Black and brown people are already dealing with that causes this. I think ringing the bell, sounding the alarm here in Massachusetts, we've gotten the attention of our governor, and here in Boston, our mayor, in a way that they are attempting to respond to what we're saying to them. But it's not new to them either. They know that this exists, and it's not like this is the first time we're ringing the bell around these issues. It's just that we cannot get away from this issue at this time. It's just here, and we need to deal with it. And I hope that on the other side of this, we are living in a different world, in a new world, in a new normal.